right, good morning everyone, and thank you for joining us today. Before we begin remarks, just want to recognize a few folks who have joined us. Assemblyman Slater, representing State Senator Rob Rolison, Dane Pascacello, as well as Putnam Town Board, Putnam Valley Town Supervisor Jackie Anabi, Town Board members Louis Luongo, Stacy Tompkins, Sherry Howard, Christian Russo, Putnam Valley Fire Department Chief DeMarco, President of the Fire Department Cheryl Luongo, Mahopac Falls Chief Murray, Assistant Chief of Garrison Sandy Bowl, and we also have Highway Superintendent former Chief Sean Keeler, as well as Putnam County Legislator Aaron Crowley. First and foremost, I want to recognize the crucial work that OSHA does and the importance of their effort to keep our first responders safe. The bravery and dedication of our first responders is truly commendable, and it's vital that we ensure their safety. But today, I want to talk about some serious concerns we all have with OSHA's proposed emergency response standard. In my district, New York's 17th Congressional District, about 90% of our fire departments are run and serviced by volunteers. These are folks who step up to protect their neighbors, often without any compensation. They operate on shoestring budgets, and their commitment and heroism keeps our communities safe. Now, OSHA's new rule sets to treat these volunteer departments the same as large urban, paid career fire departments. This doesn't make sense. Let me give you a concrete example of this. One of our local volunteer fire departments has an annual operating budget of $190,000. Out of that, they spend about $30,000 on physicals for their members. If these new rules come into play, their operating costs could skyrocket to between $300,000 and $500,000 a year. Another local department with the $660,000 budget would see costs increase by almost $300,000 a year. This is an impossible burden for small departments and for taxpayers. If these volunteer departments can't afford to meet the new requirements, we could see many of them shut down. Imagine the impact of that. Communities left without essential emergency services. This is a matter of life and death. If a fire breaks out or a medical emergency happens, who's going to respond to it? And it's not just about the immediate cost. These departments are already struggling with recruitment and retention. In a state like New York, where the cost of living is high, it's tough to find people willing to volunteer their time. And we've seen more and more the number of volunteers has declined. Adding more financial and logistical burdens could push additional volunteers away, further weakening our emergency response system. But beyond that, there's an even broader impact. To meet these new requirements, local governments might have to raise property taxes significantly within fire districts that don't have the financial ability to meet the requirements for this new rule. And we're talking about what could be hundreds of dollars in new property taxes on top of the already high cost of living our residents face. It's unfair and unrealistic to expect our communities to shoulder this additional burden. Now, OSHA has extended the comment period, which is a step in the right direction, but more time and thorough consideration are needed, and having the comment period close today is unacceptable. It's become clear to me through my conversations and through the testimony of fire officials before the House Homeland Security Committee last month, which I waived on to participate in, that the interests and concerns of volunteer fire departments have not been adequately represented in this proposal. So we need to ensure that the unique challenges and needs of our volunteer departments are fully understood and addressed. And I urge OSHA to reconsider this proposed rule. We need a more balanced and realistic approach. It cannot be a one-size-fits-all approach. Exemptions for small, rural, and volunteer departments should be on the table, and we must explore ways to reduce financial and logistical burdens. We have to protect our first responders without jeopardizing the very services that keep our communities safe. And with that, I'd like to introduce my friend and colleague, Assemblyman Slater.
to thank Congressman Lawler for joining us here in Putnam County, and I want to thank all the great first responders who are behind us. Senator Rollison, a great partner of mine in Albany, and I met with the Putnam Valley Fire Department, it was just last week. And we had a very frank discussion about the impact that these proposed regs will have. This is the definition of an unfunded mandate. There's no doubt about it. And just like in Albany, Washington is actually proposing something without having the clear and direct conversation with the people it will impact the most, the brave men and women standing behind me, the brave men and women who answer the call during emergencies. You know, Putnam County is all volunteer services. And if you look at the FASNY analysis, if we lose our volunteer services, property taxes are expected to have to go up by 45%. I'll say that again, 45% property tax hike if we lose these volunteer fire departments and our EMS. You know, this congressman, when he was in the assembly, recognized the importance of our volunteer first responders, which is why he spearheaded a great incentive of the 10% property tax break for those who serve our communities. This is an important discussion that has to be had. We all recognize that we need to make sure that we're keeping our first responders safe, whether they're volunteer, professional, or mixed. But at the end of the day, we have to make sure the right people are at the table. And it's very clear to me, listening to the people who do the work themselves, that they have not had the adequate time nor the invitation to participate in this conversation. And at the end of the day, that's going to jeopardize public safety, and it's going to jeopardize the affordability crisis that we're continuing to face here in the Hudson Valley and across New York State. And so I echo the Congressman's calls for OSHA to extend the comment period again, to make sure that they're actually bringing the right stakeholders to the table, and they recognize the impact that this rule and this proposal will have on small volunteer fire departments like the one we're at today. And so I again want to thank the Congressman for his voice and his leadership. I want to thank Senator Rollison, who couldn't be here today, but has been a very strong advocate for our first responders as well. And of course, the first responders standing behind us. They do amazing work every single day. Well, on our worst day, at our worst emergency, they're the ones who are showing up. And it's time, I think, that Washington recognizes that and brings them to the table to understand what their impact is going to be here. So I want to thank everyone again for coming. I want to thank the Congressman, and I want to thank our town board, our supervisor, Jackie Anabi, and all the leaders in our community. Thank you, Congressman.
Now introduce Town Supervisor Jackie Anabi.
Thank you. I want to thank the Congressman, and I want to thank our Senator. I'd like to thank our Congressman, our Senator, and our Assemblyman for putting this together. We brought this attention to our local and state officials and federal officials just last week and told them how important this is, because it's a community like Putnam Valley, whose budget, the entire budget is $14 million. Our fire department is a contracted entity. If this OSHA regulation goes through, our taxes in this community could double. That we can't afford that. We can't afford to live in Putnam Valley or Putnam County or the state of New York. This got to stop. These unfunded mandates from the federal side and state side, they have to stop. We got to do something for our volunteers. I know these men and women, and I know if this put through, I know they'll do it because they're volunteers. They have their heart in it, but it can't happen because the taxes can't afford it. We can't afford this to happen for our taxpayers. So thank you very much for allowing us. Thank you very much for allowing me to speak. And I want to thank our volunteers for everything you do. So thank you very much.
Now ask Putnam Valley Fire Department Chief DeMarco to come up and say a few words.
So to put it quite simply, all I can say is we definitely appreciate OSHA and what they do. We also appreciate NFPA, which is going to be the guideline for this standard. My only problem is it seems to be extremely unrealistic to expect volunteers to do what they're talking about. It's not just training, it's equipment, trucks, and everything else. And again, I think it would essentially cripple many, many volunteer fire departments. And I just think it's a lot to ask for at this point. And I think it's something that maybe could be implemented over a long period of time, not in one fair swoop.
Thanks, Chief. So again, to reiterate, you know, OSHA obviously serves an important purpose to ensure the safety, the well-being of workers all over the country. And with this new rule, they want to obviously focus in and ensure the safety and well-being of our first responders and our firefighters. And we recognize that and appreciate that. But you cannot have a one-size-fits-all approach. And the reality is that throughout the state of New York and throughout the country, most of our communities rely on volunteer fire and emergency services. And in my district, there are only two departments that have career personnel. Everyone else is volunteer. And as Assemblyman Slater pointed out, everyone in Putnam County is volunteer. Everyone in Rockland County is volunteer. So this is a challenge for our communities. The cost associated with these proposed rule changes would be astronomical. The volunteer force, which is already facing challenges with recruitment and retention, would face even more severe challenges, especially when you start to put in some of the requirements on training that are being talked about. And taxpayers are ultimately going to be the ones on the hook. And we live in among the highest property tax areas in the country. Rockland and Westchester counties in particular have the highest property taxes in America. And so this is a real challenge for municipalities who are trying to stay under the 2% property tax cap here in New York, who are trying to ensure that our residents can afford to live here. The volunteer fire departments are critical to help ease the burden on property taxpayers. If those were to fall as a result of these proposed regs, property taxpayers would face an astronomical increase, and that is unsustainable for our communities. So with that, happy to take any questions. Yes, sir.
If OSHA were to hear this and tweak it, what would be the ideal way in which you'd like to see it?
Well, one of the things that we've been doing, we've had a hearing down in Washington on these proposed regs. We, as a New York delegation, have asked them for more time so that all of our departments could get the opportunity to submit their concerns, their response to these proposed regs. Today is the current deadline. Obviously, we would like to see this continue to be extended because the proposed regs are cumbersome, and it's actually taken a lot of work for FASNY and other entities to go through and identify which sections they're talking about, etc., and come back with proposed changes or tweaks or responses. So to me, the objective is to get the feedback from our volunteer firefighters as well as our career departments so that their voice can be heard in this process and work through that. So what we're collecting is from all of our volunteer departments, the feedback that they are submitting to OSHA. We're asking for a copy of that so that we as members of Congress can review that and then go to OSHA specifically with the requested changes and push on that. We want to hear from the experts. We want to hear from our volunteer fire departments on where the concerns are, both from a training standpoint, from an equipment standpoint, as well as obviously from a cost standpoint, so that we can go back to OSHA. As I said, this should not be a one-size-fits-all approach. What works in New York City does not necessarily work in the Hudson Valley, given obviously budgets and given manpower. And I think we need to be realistic about that. Any other questions?
Off topic?
We can do that
Yeah, no
separately.
problem.
I wonder what that's about.
Yeah.
Boy, gee, I wonder.
Sorry I'm late.
No, that's okay. You're good. All right. Well, thank you, everyone. I appreciate you coming today and appreciate all of our volunteer firefighters and all the great work that they do on behalf of our community throughout the Hudson Valley, but especially here in Putnam Valley. Thank you.